In this class, we are going to study about the last category of the kingdom Protista, and that is the protozoans. So now we are studying it under the kingdom Protista, but before it was placed in the kingdom Animalia, and these protozoans were considered as a phylum under the kingdom Animalia. So we know that the kingdom Animalia has a lot of phylum like the Porifera or the Coelenterata or the Arthropoda, mollusca. Likewise, this was also just a phylum under the kingdom Animalia, and the reason behind that is that it has lots of properties which are quite similar to the animals. For example, holozoic nutrition, apart from the presence or the absence of cell wall. So these properties are similar to animals, and that is why these organisms, that is the protozoans, are regarded as the ancestor of animals. So that is why, because of similar properties to the animals, these were previously placed under the kingdom Animalia as a phylum. But now these have been separated from the kingdom Animalia and these have been put under the this category, that is the kingdom Protista. Now these organisms were first studied by Leeuwenhoek. So he was the person who first studied about these organisms through his microscope. And the name Protozoa was not given by Leeuwenhoek. It was given by another scientist whose name was Goldfuss. So these are the two scientists whose names we have to remember in this category. So these organisms are very similar to animals. So we are going to see all those properties. So the three main properties are there: non-photosynthetic, absence of cell wall, and likewise the holozoic nutrition. So these are the three most important properties of this category which is similar to the animals. So now first of all, see the features or properties of this category. So these organisms are normally unicellular or acellular and also non-photosynthetic. These might be solitary, that is these stay alone, or these might be colonial. Now these are found in all aquatic habitats, be it marine water or fresh water, any type of aquatic habitat, or also in some very moist soil conditions. Apart from that, these organisms could also be as a parasite like the Plasmodium, which causes malaria. So there are lots of other types or forms of these category. So these are unicellular, non-photosynthetic, aquatic, aquatic, all fresh water and all marine water bodies do contain these organisms. And these are also terrestrial, but in terrestrial normally moist conditions are required, not very dry conditions are suitable for these organisms. Now these are also colonial, that means these could live as a colony, or these could be parasitic. For example, the Plasmodium which we just studied, that is it causes malaria, or the entamoeba causes dysentery, or giardia which causes diarrhea. So these are parasitic protozoans. So these cause diseases in various organisms. Now these were previously placed under the phylum Protozoa of the kingdom Animalia. So initially it was a phylum under the kingdom Animalia because these have some animal-like properties like holozoic nutrition. Holozoic nutrition means taking or ingesting food as a whole or in parts. So such type of nutrition is found normally in the case of animals. So this holozoic nutrition is giving it similarity with the animals. Likewise, locomotion. Animals are normally capable of locomotion. Apart from the phylum Porifera, normally all the animals are capable of locomotion. So these have also various locomotory structures like pseudopodia or flagella or also cilia. So these are the locomotory structures. So these can perform locomotion, and when these organisms can perform locomotion, it means these are similar with the animals. Apart from that, these do not have cell wall, and we know that Monera, Protista, fungi and plantae have cell wall. Animalia does not have cell wall. So these also have no cell wall. Apart from that, these are also non-photosynthetic, and we know very well that animals cannot perform photosynthetic. So these features or these properties or characteristics are very similar to the kingdom Animalia, and that is why these organisms are regarded as the ancestor of animals. Now they have a few more properties, like they do not have cell wall, we just studied. So absence of cell wall means that the cells are naked. Naked cells means only the plasma lemma or the plasma membrane would be there. Cell wall is not there. So it could be that the cell is naked. Apart from that, instead of the cell wall, there should be or there could be a proteinaceous non-cellulosic layer, and that is a flexible sort of a layer which is called as pellicle. So instead of cell wall, there could be pellicle. So when pellicle is present, the cell is no more naked. Only when the cell wall is absent and no other structure is present or at its place, in that case only the cell is called as naked. But if in place of cell wall some other structure like pellicle or silica shell or calcium carbonate shells, if these structures are covering the cell, then the cell is not called as naked. So either instead of cell wall there could be pellicle or shells of silica or calcium carbonate. So some have exoskeleton, that means external shell of calcium carbonate or silica. So we saw that these were the normal organisms who were aquatic. So in aquatic, these have freshwater and marine forms. So this calcium carbonate or silica, these structures or these coverings normally occur in the aquatic, and in aquatic mostly in the marine forms. So these exoskeletons of calcium carbonate or silica normally occur in the aquatic and marine aquatic forms of the protozoa. Now, so contractile vacuoles. We have also studied about contractile vacuoles in our previous categories like the euglenoids or the dinoflagellates. So the main purpose of contractile vacuole is osmoregulation. Apart from osmoregulation, excretion could also occur. Now, these osmoregulation means that the now the osmoregulation means the balance of fluid and salts in the body. So this is what is meant by osmoregulation, and these contractile vacuoles also help in excretion of certain substances, and the various excretory products are there, and one very important excretory product is the ammonia. So the skin surface, or the body surface, because these don't actually have skin, so actually the body surface helps in respiration, that is taking of oxygen, because these are non-photosynthetic, these are animal like, they need oxygen. So for absorbing oxygen from the environment, the normal body surface or the cellular surface helps in respiration. So body surface also helps in respiration, and also it helps in excretion. Now excretion is being done by the contractile vacuole as well as the body surface or the cellular surface, and a very common excretory substance is ammonia, that is NH3. So a common excretory substrate or excretory substance is the ammonia. Now there are 4 categories of protozoans that we have to study, and the classification of protozoans has been done on the basis of presence of those locomotory structures like cilia, pseudopodia or flagellates. So we have classified these protozoans into 4 categories like flagellata or the sarcodyna or the sporozoans or the ciliata. So these are the 4 structures that have been classified on the basis of locomotory structures. Now the first category, that is the flagellata. So as we can see from the name flagellata, so that means that in this category the locomotory structure would be flagella. The second category is the sarcodyna. So this sarcodyna has pseudopodia for locomotion or obtaining food. Now the third category is the sporozoans. So in sporozoans, locomotory structures are generally absent at least in one stage. So it is written that these lack locomotory structures, but it is not sure, or it is not for certain that locomotory structures would be absent in every category or every phase of the life cycle. For example, in this plasmodium which causes malaria, at some stage it is called as zookinete. So that zookinete is capable of locomotion because it is a worm-like organism. So these lack locomotory structures in some phases or at some stages, not throughout the life cycle. This is a very important point. That is, these lack locomotory structures at least in one stage or one phase, not throughout the life cycle. In some point of life cycle, these can have locomotory structures. Now the fourth category, as we can see from the name ciliata, so that means the locomotory structure present in the category of ciliata is the cilia. Now we have to remember the various examples, and there are lots and lots of parasitic or pathogenic categories of organisms here. That is, those are disease causing, and the very common diseases caused by these organisms have been discussed here. So we have this giardia which causes diarrhea, and this is a disease very common in children because these children have normally the habit of eating soils or licking various surfaces. So children generally do have giardia infection. This giardia is also called as grand old man of intestine, and it has lots of flagella. About 6 to 8 flagella are present, and all those flagellas are directed backwards. So this giardia is one example, and it causes a disease which is called as diarrhea. Likewise, there is another category called leishmania, and leishmania causes kala-azar. Apart from that, we have another category, that is trypanosoma. It causes sleeping sickness, which is spread by a sese fly. That is a fly which spreads the sese fly spreads this disease, just like the Anopheles mosquito spreads malaria. So that is a vector of this disease. And the one more example is the trichomonas. So that causes a disease which is called as trichomoniasis. Now the complete name here is that Trichomonas vaginalis. That is the complete name. So normally we have to remember the genus only. So leishmania is causing kala-azar, giardia is causing diarrhea, trypanosoma is causing sleeping sickness, and also the trichomonas is causing trichomoniasis. Now one more important point to remember here is that these are either free living or parasitic. So there are two of these very common forms of the flagellated. So obviously these can be free living because these have the capability to do locomotion. So these can reach their food source easily, or when present inside some other organism, these are parasitic. So these are the two common forms. Now the second one is the sarcodina or rhizopoda. So rhizopoda or sarcodina has locomotory structure which is called as pseudopodia. You must have studied about amoeba in your lower classes. So amoeba gives out something called as false feet or pseudopodia. That is helping it in its feeding. That is, it engulfs the food particle also, and also that pseudopodia is helping the amoeba in locomotion. So this is what you must have studied in your lower classes also. So here we have example of amoeba or the entamoeba. Now this amoeba generally does not cause disease to humans, but there is something called as entamoeba, and it causes a disease which is called as amoebic dysentery. So this is a very common disease which normally spreads through contaminated water and soil or contaminated food. So these organisms have some marine forms, and those marine forms have silica shells on their outer surface. So marine forms of sarcodina or rhizopoda generally have this silica shells on the exterior of their body, and this silica is a very resistant material. Now the third category is the sporozoans. So these do not have locomotory structures at some stage, and a very common point to remember here is that these have an infectious stage in their life cycle. These normally have one infectious stage which is called as sporozoid. So normally the infectious stage are called as sporozoite. So these organisms are intracellular or intercellular. That is, these organisms can enter human cells or other animal cells and cause disease. And apart from that, these can also live in intercellular spaces. For example, in the liver intercellular spaces, the plasmodium can live and cause the disease which is called as malaria. So these are either intracellular, that is within the cell, or intercellular, that is between the cells, and these are endoparasites, that is these live within the body, and these have an spore-like infectious stage in their life cycle, and that infectious stage is called as sporozoite in the case of plasmodium, and this plasmodium causes malaria. Now there are various species of plasmodium. For example, plasmodium ovale or plasmodium falciparum or plasmodium malariae or plasmodium vivax. So these are the 4 species of plasmodium which we will study in standard 12th in the chapter human health and diseases. So all these diseases we have to study all these diseases again in standard 12th, and there we will study about all these diseases in detail. Here we are only studying the names of these organisms, but when we will study about the chapter human health and diseases, we will study about all whichever diseases are being discussed here. All those diseases will be discussed in detail. Here you just have to remember the names of the parasites and also the disease that they cause. So this plasmodium is a very common parasite of the humans, and it causes malaria, and malaria is a very common sickness or illness, especially in developing countries like African countries or South Asian countries, which are normally developing countries. In those countries malaria is very common. Now the 4th category, that is having cilia as the locomotory structure, and also these are mostly free living. That is, we can also say these are alone or maybe in association or solitary. So these are mostly freshwater organisms, but a few marine forms are also present. So if we talk about the majority of the ciliates, these are free living freshwater organisms, but only a few organisms or the minority of this category are marine forms. That is, they live in marine water of oceans or seas or some other structures. Now there is a very important point, that is the trichocyst. It is a very important cell organelle in the case of paramecium or in general in the ciliates. So this is an ejective organelle, that is, it could be ejected from the cell. And what is the purpose of trichocyst? It is offense, that is for killing its enemy, or for defense, that is protecting itself from the predator. And also this ejective organelle, which is called as trichocyst, it helps in attachment to the substratum, that is, it helps the ciliates to get attached to a surface. So these are the 3 functions of this trichocyst: offense, defense and attachment. So this is a very important cell organelle in the case of ciliates. Now one more thing to remember in the case of ciliates is that they generally have more than one nucleus, and the first nucleus or the bigger nucleus, which is called as macronucleus, it helps in metabolism control. So the metabolism of the paramecium is controlled by the larger nucleus. So it is polyploid. Polyploid means that the number of chromosomes is much more or much in a multiple as compared to the normal number of chromosomes. So it has no role in reproduction of this paramecium or heredity of the paramecium. But there is a smaller nucleus which is called as micronucleus, and this is the real nucleus because it controls the heredity or the genes which are being transferred from one generation to the other. That is under the control of micronucleus. So this is the actual original hereditary nucleus, and this macronucleus is only for controlling metabolism. It does not play any role in heredity, that is transmission of genes or characters from one generation to another generation. So macronucleus does not have a role in that. And a very important example is paramecium. So it has cilia all over the body surface. So cilia is also a locomotory structure, flagella is also a locomotory structure, but these have differences and similarities. For example, this flagella is a very long structure as compared to the cilia. Cilia is a very small structure as compared to the flagella. Apart from that, the cilia has lots of action, something like a oar of various long boats which have oars on their sides. Cilia works just like that, and flagella performs whip-like action. So their mode of action is different. So flagella is performing whip-like action and cilia is working like the oars of a boat. So just like a boat is steered with the help of oars, so the same way cilia also steers the cell, or rather the food towards the gullet or the oral cavity, or rather the cytopharynx of this paramecium. So cilia works relatively faster. So the speed of locomotion is slower in the case of flagella and faster in the case of cilia, and maximum 1 to 2 millimeter per second is the speed of locomotion with the help of cilia. So if we talk about the speed, then cilia works faster, or cilia causes faster locomotion as compared to flagella, but cilia are very smaller structure as compared to the flagella, and flagella are normally few, 1 2 3 4 or a few more flagella are in a cell, but in a cell there are hundreds and hundreds of cilia. So the number of cilia in a cell is much greater as compared to the number of flagella in a cell. So now we have completed the last category of the protist, and that was the protozoans. So hereby we have completed the kingdom Protista.